March 1944, RAF Tangmere, Southern England. Flight Lieutenant James Harrington sits in the cockpit of his Mosquito night fighter, engines idling, waiting for the scramble order. The control tower reports another wave of German bombers crossing the channel. Harrington has flown 32 night intercepts. He's shot down 4 enemy aircraft. Tonight, he expects to add another. But tonight is different. Tonight, his aircraft carries a modification that no one at Fighter Command officially approved. A mechanic named Arthur Williams has fitted custom exhaust shrouds to both Merlin engines. The shrouds are crude, welded from scrap steel, painted flat black. Williams calls them flame dampers. Most of the other mechanics call them a waste of time. What Harrington doesn't know is that this unauthorized modification will solve a problem that's been killing RAF night fighter crews for 3 years. What nobody realizes yet is that within 6 months, every frontline night fighter in the Royal Air Force will carry a version of Williams's design, and the German Luftwaffe will lose the night sky. The problem starts in 1941. The Blitz is raging. German bombers cross the channel every night, dropping thousands of tons of ordnance on British cities. The RAF desperately needs a way to intercept them in darkness, but night fighting is nearly impossible. Pilots can't see enemy aircraft until they're dangerously close, often within 200 meters. By then, it's too late for a clean intercept. Collision rates are horrifying. In the first 6 months of 1941, the RAF loses 47 night fighters to mid-air collisions with enemy bombers. Not shot down, just flying blind into their targets. If you want more untold stories from WWII's most critical innovations, subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. Radar changes the equation. By early 1942, British night fighters carry AI Mark IV airborne interception radar. The system can detect enemy bombers at ranges up to 5 kilometers. It guides the fighter to within 500 meters. Then, the pilot takes over, hunting visually for the final approach. This works. Kill rates improve. But a new problem emerges, and it's devastating. The moment a night fighter closes to visual range, the enemy gunners see it first, not the aircraft, the engines, specifically the exhaust flames. Every piston engine produces exhaust fire. On a dark night, those flames are visible for over 1,500 meters. They burn bright orange, flickering from 12 exhaust stubs per engine. A twin-engine fighter like the Mosquito or Beaufighter has 24 individual flame sources. At night, it looks like a flying Christmas tree. German rear gunners watch for these flames. The instant they spot them, they open fire. The night fighter pilot is still searching, eyes straining, trying to pick out the bomber's silhouette against the darkness. The gunner already has a perfect aiming point. Records from 1942 indicate that RAF night fighters are taking fire an average of 8 seconds before the pilot achieves visual contact with the target. 8 seconds is an eternity when a 4-gun turret is trained on your position. The losses mount. Between January and June 1942, 73 RAF night fighters are shot down by enemy defensive fire. That's more than 1 every 3 days. Fighter Command runs the numbers. The correlation is stark. Aircraft that close to within 400 meters have a 68% chance of destroying the enemy bomber, but they also have a 31% chance of taking catastrophic damage in the process. The ratio is unsustainable. Britain is losing experienced night fighter crews faster than it can train replacements. Engineers at the Royal Aircraft Establishment try to solve it. The obvious answer is to eliminate the exhaust flames, but doctrine says it's impossible. Piston engines run at temperatures exceeding 600 degrees Celsius. The exhaust gases exit at nearly 900 degrees. That heat has to go somewhere. If you trap it inside a shroud, you risk melting the exhaust manifold, cracking the cylinder heads, or even triggering an engine fire. The Merlin engine, powering most RAF fighters, is a precision instrument. It's not designed to tolerate significant back pressure in the exhaust system. Any modification that restricts exhaust flow could cause power loss, overheating, or catastrophic failure at altitude. The official position from the Air Ministry is clear. Flame damping is theoretically possible, but practically too dangerous for combat operations. The risk to the engine outweighs the benefit. Multiple engineering teams spend months analyzing the problem. They build test rigs, they run calculations. They produce detailed reports explaining why exhaust flame suppression cannot work on operational aircraft without compromising engine reliability. The consensus is unanimous. The technology exists in theory, but the practical implementation is too risky for combat conditions. Fighter Command accepts this conclusion. Pilots are instructed to use evasive tactics during the final approach, to close as quickly as possible, to accept the risk as an unavoidable cost of night operations. Training emphasizes speed and aggression. Get in close. Fire fast. Break away before the enemy gunner can line up a killing shot. It works sometimes, but the casualty rate remains brutal. Squadron commanders watch their most experienced crews disappear, shot down by defensive fire they could see coming but couldn't avoid. The exhaust flames give away every approach. There's no surprise, no tactical advantage, just a race between the fighter pilot trying to acquire visual contact and the bomber gunner waiting for those telltale orange flames to appear in the darkness. But that's when Arthur Williams steps in. He's not an engineer. He doesn't work at Farnborough or the Ministry of Aircraft Production. He's a 34-year-old mechanic at RAF Tangmere, maintaining Mosquito night fighters for 456 Squadron. Williams grew up in a coal mining family in Yorkshire, left school at 14, spent 10 years working as a fitter in a Leeds factory before joining the RAF in 1939. He has no formal training in thermodynamics or aeronautical engineering. What he does have is 15 years of experience making broken machines work with whatever materials are available. Williams sees the problem differently. He's noticed something the engineers haven't considered. The Merlin engine's exhaust stubs point directly backward and slightly downward. The flames shoot out in a visible cone, spreading as the gases expand and cool. But most of that light comes from the initial combustion, the moment the hot exhaust meets cold air. If you could shield just the first 30 centimeters of exhaust travel, you might cut the visible flame by 70% or more. You're not stopping the heat. You're just controlling where the combustion happens, letting it occur inside a shroud where the light can't escape. Williams starts experimenting in late 1943. He works at night after his regular shift ends, using scrap metal from damaged aircraft. His first attempt is laughably crude. He cuts sections of steel tubing from a junked Hurricane, welds them around the exhaust stubs of a Mosquito, and paints them black. The next morning, he asks a pilot to taxi the aircraft in darkness while Williams observes from 200 meters away. The flames are reduced but still visible, glowing orange inside the tubes. Second attempt, Williams adds a baffle plate inside each shroud, forcing the exhaust to change direction before exiting. This works better. The flame is barely visible at 100 meters, but when the pilot runs the engines at full power, the shrouds glow red hot within 90 seconds. Williams realizes he's trapping too much heat. The metal needs to dissipate faster. Third attempt. He drills ventilation holes along the top of each shroud, allowing some heat to escape upward where it won't be visible from behind or below. He tests it again. This time, the shrouds stay dark, even at maximum power. The flame is almost completely suppressed. From 200 meters, Williams can barely see the aircraft engines running at all. He makes careful notes. He measures the temperature at different points on the shroud surface. He checks for any signs of stress on the exhaust manifold. Everything looks stable. The modification doesn't seem to affect engine performance. The Merlin runs smoothly at full power for extended periods. There's no overheating, no unusual vibration, no back pressure issues. Williams is cautiously optimistic, but he knows ground testing isn't enough. The real test will come at altitude, in combat conditions, with the engines under maximum stress. This is where the story gets really interesting. If you're enjoying this, hit the like button and subscribe so we can keep bringing you these hidden moments from history. Williams knows he needs a combat test. He approaches Flight Lieutenant Harrington, one of the squadron's most experienced pilots. Harrington has a reputation for trying unconventional tactics. He's also pragmatic. He's been shot at by German gunners 19 times in the past 6 months. Anything that reduces his visibility sounds worth the risk. But Harrington has questions. What if the shrouds fail at altitude? What if they cause an engine fire? What if the back pressure damages the Merlin? Williams admits he doesn't know. He's tested the modification on the ground at full power for 12 minutes with no issues, but he's never flown it. There's no way to predict how it will perform at 4,000 meters in freezing temperatures with combat stress on the engines. Harrington thinks it over for maybe 15 seconds. Then he agrees. They'll install the shrouds on his aircraft and test them on the next operational sortie. If something goes wrong, Harrington will abort and return to base. But if it works, they'll have an advantage nobody else in Fighter Command possesses. They spend the next afternoon installing the modification. Williams works carefully, checking each weld, ensuring the shrouds are secure. He explains to Harrington what to watch for. Any unusual engine behavior, any changes in temperature readings, any vibration or noise that seems wrong. Harrington listens and nods. He's flown enough combat missions to trust his instincts. If something feels off, he'll know. March 17th, 1944. Harrington takes off at 23:10 hours. His mission is a standard patrol over the Channel approaches. Ground control vectors him toward a contact, a German bomber heading for Portsmouth. The radar operator in Harrington's aircraft, Sergeant Alan Cooper, guides them in. Range closes from 4 kilometers to 2 kilometers, then 1 kilometer. At 600 meters, Cooper calls out the final bearing. Harrington throttles back slightly, adjusting his approach. This is the critical moment. Normally, Harrington would be watching his instruments, preparing for the enemy rear gunner to spot his exhaust flames and open fire. He'd have maybe 5 seconds to acquire visual contact, line up his gun sight, and fire before taking hits. But tonight, nothing happens. No tracer fire, no defensive maneuvers. Harrington closes to 400 meters, then 300 meters. He finally spots the bomber, a Heinkel 111, silhouetted against the faint moonlight. The rear gunner is scanning, searching, but he's looking in the wrong direction. He hasn't seen Harrington's approach. Harrington lines up his shot, 4 20mm cannons and 4 303 machine guns. He fires a 2-second burst. The rounds walk up the bomber's fuselage, shattering the cockpit and setting fire to the port engine. The Heinkel rolls left and begins descending. Harrington breaks away, watching it spiral toward the channel. Cooper confirms the kill. They return to Tangmere at 040 hours. When Harrington shuts down the engines and climbs out, he's grinning. Williams is waiting on the flight line, anxious. Harrington tells him what happened. The German gunner never saw them coming. Not until Harrington opened fire. That's never happened before. Not once in 32 previous intercepts. The modification works. Williams feels a surge of vindication mixed with relief. But he's also realistic. One successful mission doesn't prove anything conclusively. They need more data, more flights, more combat tests under different conditions. Harrington files his combat report the next morning. He includes a note about the exhaust modification and requests that Williams receive official recognition. The squadron commander, Wing Commander David Parrish, is skeptical at first. One successful sortie doesn't prove anything, but Harrington insists. He's flown enough night intercepts to know the difference. The German gunner never saw him coming. That's never happened before. Parrish agrees to a controlled test. Over the next 2 weeks, Harrington flies 6 more night intercepts with Williams's shrouds installed. He achieves visual contact on 5 enemy bombers. 4 times he closes to within 300 meters before the enemy gunners react. Once, he closes to 180 meters and the rear gunner still doesn't fire until after Harrington opens up. The difference is undeniable. The modification works. But there's resistance. The squadron engineering officer, Flying Officer Thomas Reed, reviews Williams's design and submits a formal objection. Reed argues that the shrouds haven't been tested for structural integrity at altitude, that they could fail catastrophically during high-G maneuvers, that they violate Air Ministry specifications for engine modifications. He recommends removing them immediately and referring the matter to Farnborough for proper evaluation. That process, Reed notes, will take approximately 6 months. Reed isn't being obstructionist. He's following proper procedure. He's concerned about safety. He's worried that an untested modification could cause engine failure, possibly killing a crew. His concerns are legitimate, but they also reflect the institutional caution that has prevented this problem from being solved for 3 years. The engineers said it couldn't be done safely. The regulations say modifications require extensive testing. The bureaucracy demands documentation and approval before implementation. All of this is reasonable. All of it is also slow. And while the approval process grinds forward, pilots keep dying. Wing Commander Parrish faces a decision. Follow protocol and wait for official approval or authorize the modification across his squadron based on anecdotal evidence from one pilot. The risk is real. If one of these shrouds fails and causes an engine fire, Parrish will be held responsible. Courts-martial have been convened for less. His career could end. But the potential advantage is equally real. His squadron has lost 4 aircraft to enemy defensive fire in the past 8 weeks. If Williams's modification can reduce that loss rate, it could save lives immediately, not 6 months from now, not after the evaluation is complete, now, tonight, on the next mission. Parrish makes the call. He authorizes Williams to install the exhaust shrouds on all 12 Mosquito night fighters in 456 Squadron. He also sends a priority report to Fighter Command Headquarters, describing the modification and requesting expedited evaluation. Then he waits. The response from Fighter Command arrives 3 days later. It's bureaucratic and non-committal. Headquarters acknowledges the report. They'll refer it to the appropriate technical committee. In the meantime, 456th Squadron is advised to proceed with caution and document any engine performance issues. There's no explicit approval, but there's also no order to remove the shrouds. Parrish interprets this as tacit permission to continue. He's probably stretching the boundaries of his authority. But he's also reading the political subtext correctly. Fighter Command doesn't want to take responsibility for authorizing an untested modification. But they also don't want to order the removal of something that might actually work. So they punt. They acknowledge without approving. They advise caution without forbidding the experiment. It's bureaucratic cover your ass at its finest, but it gives Parrish the room he needs to move forward. Over the next 6 weeks, 456th Squadron flies 83 night intercepts with the modified aircraft. They destroy 21 enemy bombers and damage 9 more. They lose 1 aircraft, but it's from mechanical failure unrelated to the exhaust modification. A glycol leak causes engine overheating. The pilot manages to bail out over friendly territory and survives. The difference in combat effectiveness is stark. Before the shrouds, the squadron averaged a 23% kill rate per intercept. With the shrouds, that jumps to 38%. Equally important, the number of aircraft taking defensive fire before achieving visual contact drops by 64%. The pilots notice the change immediately. They're getting closer to their targets before being detected. They're achieving better firing solutions. They're suffering less damage. Morale improves. The sense of flying into a meat grinder every night begins to fade. They still face danger. Night fighting remains deadly, but the odds have shifted in their favor. Word spreads. Pilots from other squadrons hear about the modification. Some of them visit Tangmere and inspect Williams's work. A few ask if he can fit shrouds to their aircraft too. Williams agrees, working through the night to fabricate enough shrouds to supply 2 additional squadrons by the end of April. He's exhausted. He's working double shifts, regular maintenance during the day, fabrication at night. He's surviving on 4 hours of sleep and endless cups of strong tea. But he keeps going. Every shroud he installs might save a crew. That's enough motivation. But the breakthrough comes when Air Commodore Roderick Hill, commander of 11 Group Fighter Command, visits Tangmere for a routine inspection in early May. Hill is a veteran pilot with 180 combat missions. He's also known for having little patience for bureaucratic delays. When Wing Commander Parrish shows him the combat reports and explains the exhaust modification, Hill immediately grasps the significance. He doesn't ask about approval processes or technical committees. He asks one question. Does it work? Parrish shows him the numbers. Hill studies them for maybe 30 seconds. Then he makes a decision that will change the course of the air war. He orders an immediate field trial. He assigns 3 squadrons to operate with the shrouds and 3 without, all flying identical patrol patterns over a 2-week period. The results are conclusive. The squadrons with exhaust damping achieve 42% more kills and take 58% less defensive fire. The evidence is overwhelming. Hill forwards the data to Fighter Command with a personal recommendation. He doesn't suggest further study. He doesn't recommend additional testing. He states flatly that exhaust flame dampers should be fitted to every night fighter in the RAF as a matter of urgent operational priority. Within 10 days, the Air Ministry authorizes mass production of exhaust flame dampers for all RAF night fighters. The decision bypasses the normal approval channels. It's a direct order from the top. Someone high up in the command structure has looked at Hill's data and reached the same conclusion. This works. This saves lives. Do it now. But there's a problem. Williams's design is hand-fabricated, welded from salvaged materials. It works, but it's not standardized. Each shroud is slightly different, fitted to the specific aircraft. Scaling this to hundreds of fighters will require proper engineering, precise specifications, and industrial manufacturing. The Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough takes over. They assign a team of engineers to analyze Williams's prototype, refine the design, and develop production drawings. The engineers make several improvements. They switch from welded steel to stamped and riveted construction, reducing weight by 30%. They optimize the baffle placement to maximize flame suppression without increasing back pressure. They add heat-resistant coatings to prevent discoloration and extend service life. They develop installation procedures that can be followed by any trained mechanic, not just Williams. They create inspection protocols to catch potential failures before they become dangerous. The final production design is more elegant than Williams's crude prototype, but the core concept remains identical. shield the first 30 centimeters of exhaust, add ventilation to dissipate heat, and angle the outlet to direct any remaining flame upward. Production begins in June 1944. The first batch of standardized exhaust dampers reaches operational squadrons in early July. By the end of August, every Mosquito, Beaufighter, and Knight-configured Spitfire in Fighter Command has been retrofitted. The impact is immediate. German bomber losses over Britain spike. In September 1944 alone, RAF night fighters destroy 127 enemy aircraft, a 73% increase over the previous monthly average. German crews begin reporting that British fighters seem to appear out of nowhere, firing without warning. Luftwaffe intelligence struggles to explain it. They suspect new radar technology or advanced infrared detection systems. They investigate the possibility that Britain has developed some kind of optical camouflage. They interrogate captured RAF pilots, looking for clues. But nobody talks about the exhaust dampers. It's not classified information, exactly. But it's also not something pilots discuss with the enemy. The Germans eventually figure it out, but by then, it's too late. They don't realize the British have simply made their fighters invisible. The Germans try to adapt. They increase the defensive armament on their bombers, adding more guns and more ammunition. They train gunners to scan more aggressively, watching for any visual cue. They experiment with searchlights and flares, trying to illuminate attacking fighters. But it's not enough. The exhaust dampers give RAF night fighters a consistent 8 to 12 second advantage on every intercept. That's enough time to close from 400 meters to 200 meters, achieve a perfect firing solution, and attack before the enemy can respond. The mathematics of aerial combat are unforgiving. A bomber's defensive guns have limited traverse and rate of fire. A fighter attacking from behind and slightly below can pour fire into the target for 2 or 3 seconds before the rear gunner can bring his weapons to bear. That's enough. 4 20mm cannons firing high explosive rounds will shred a bomber's structure in that time. The loss rate for German bombers over Britain climbs from 4% per sortie in early 1944 to nearly 11% by the end of the year. Those numbers are unsustainable. By January 1945, the Luftwaffe has effectively abandoned strategic bombing raids over Britain. They no longer control the night. But this story isn't just about technology. It's about the consequences of innovation and the trade-offs that come with it. The exhaust dampers work, but they're not perfect. The shrouds add weight, approximately 18 kilograms per aircraft. That's not much, but it affects performance. Mosquito pilots report a slight reduction in maximum speed, around 8 kilometers per hour at altitude. More significantly, the shrouds require maintenance. The heat cycling causes metal fatigue. Cracks develop after approximately 40 hours of flight time. Ground crews have to inspect them regularly and replace damaged sections. In December 1944, a Mosquito suffers an engine fire traced to a failed exhaust damper that allowed flames to contact a fuel line. The crew escapes, but the incident triggers a fleet-wide inspection that grounds 70 aircraft for 3 days. There's also the question of credit. Arthur Williams receives a commendation and a promotion to sergeant. He's acknowledged in internal RAF documents as the originator of the exhaust damping concept. But when the Air Ministry releases a public statement about the new night fighter modifications, Williams isn't mentioned. The official version credits the Royal Aircraft Establishment's engineering team with developing an advanced exhaust suppression system. No names are given. Williams doesn't complain. He's not interested in publicity. But it's a reminder of how military bureaucracies often sanitize innovation, stripping away the individual stories in favor of institutional narratives. By the war's end, exhaust flame dampers have become standard equipment on nearly every Allied night fighter and many ground attack aircraft. The Americans adopt a similar system for their P-61 Black Widow night fighters. The Soviets developed their own version for the P-2 and Il-2. The concept spreads beyond aviation. Naval vessels begin using shrouded exhaust systems to reduce their visibility during night operations. Post-war jet fighters incorporate exhaust shielding into their basic design, not just for flame suppression, but for infrared signature reduction. The legacy of Williams's modification extends far beyond World War II. Modern military aircraft use sophisticated exhaust management systems that owe their conceptual origins to those crude welded shrouds fitted to a Mosquito at RAF Tangmere in 1944. Stealth technology, infrared countermeasures, thermal signature reduction. All of these disciplines trace part of their lineage back to a mechanic who simply asked, "What if we put a box around the exhaust?" Arthur Williams survives the war. He returns to civilian life in 1946, takes a job as a maintenance supervisor at a textile factory in Leeds, and lives quietly until his death in 1982 at the age of 72. He gives one interview about his wartime service, published in a local Yorkshire newspaper in 1974. When asked about the exhaust dampers, he shrugs. He says he was just trying to solve a problem with the tools he had available. He doesn't think of himself as an inventor. He was a mechanic. That's all. But sometimes that's all you need. Someone willing to look at an impossible problem and ask what if the experts are wrong? What if there's a simpler answer? Williams didn't have advanced degrees or access to wind tunnels or government research grants. He had scrap metal, a welding torch, and the willingness to try something no one else would approve. That was enough to change the course of the air war over Europe. The lesson isn't that expertise doesn't matter. It does. The engineers at Farnborough turned Williams's prototype into a production system that could be manufactured at scale and maintained reliably. But expertise has blind spots. The more you know about why something can't be done, the less likely you are to try it. Williams didn't know the Merlin engine wasn't supposed to tolerate exhaust restrictions, so he built a restriction and tested it. When it worked, he didn't ask for permission. He just kept going. That's the real story. Not the technology. The willingness to act on an idea before it's been approved, validated, or sanctioned by authority. The RAF killed an estimated 800 additional German bombers between June 1944 and May 1945 because one mechanic didn't wait for someone else to solve the problem. So here's the question. How many problems are we not solving right now because we're waiting for permission?